Welcome back. It's time for Eye on Africa. Thanks very much for being with us this evening. The headlines this hour: 150 Shabaab fighters are killed by American drone and airstrikes in Somalia. The Pentagon says the militants were preparing a large-scale attack from their base 200 kilometres to the north of Mogadishu. Tunisia is at war with barbarism, says the country's president, Beji Caid Essebsi, vows revenge after the deadly attack on the border town of Ben Guerdane. The jihadists, he says, may have been trying to take control of Tunisia's border with Libya. And counting gets underway in Benin after yesterday's election. Polls suggest a second round could be on the cards in the race to replace Thomas Boni. We'll be speaking to our correspondent, Georgia Calvin-Smith, in this news bulletin. We begin, though, this evening in Somalia, where American drones and manned aircraft have targeted a training camp, killing more than 150 Al-Shabaab fighters. According to the Pentagon, the jihadists at Razo camp, which is north of the Somali capital, were preparing to launch a large-scale attack, probably against African or American personnel. The Americans have been watching the site for several weeks. Well, for more on the story, we can speak to our correspondent in the region who joins us now. Thanks very much indeed for being with us this evening, Zoe. First of all, tell us what we know about what happened today.
Well, what we understand happened at this point mostly comes from the US government's account. According to the Pentagon, unmanned drones and manned aircraft, carried out a major strike against an Al-Shabaab training camp sometime on Saturday, so over the weekend. And it appears that up to or even more than 150 Al-Shabaab militants, according to the Pentagon, were killed in this attack. The suggestion is that the fighters were undergoing some kind of graduation ceremony. They were participating in some kind of passing out parade, and this may have explained why there were so many Al-Shabaab militants all together in one site, which is unusual at times because of the threat of drone strikes and so on. There is yet to be independent confirmation of these casualty numbers, although I have just seen a report from a Somali army commander in the area suggesting a death toll of at least 69 and rising. And we'll see what Al-Shabaab have to say if they do respond to this attack. They have a very active media wing.
Now, there have been a number of major attacks by Al-Shabaab, Zoe, over the course of the last few weeks. What do they tell us about the current strength of the movement?
I think there is a concern currently that we're seeing a resurgence of the movement, and there are various theories about why this might be the case. Certainly, Islamic State has been courting Al-Shabaab as a participant in its wider jihadist struggle. But Al-Shabaab has so far not responded to that courtship, has not sworn allegiance to Islamic State. So we might have seen a resurgence in attacks as an opportunity for Al-Shabaab to prove its force as a movement, that it's still a force to be reckoned with in the region. And certainly attacks in recent weeks have been quite concerning. We've seen a major attack on a Kenyan military base where the casualty figures of that are still yet to be confirmed. There have been attacks on civilian targets in Somalia itself, and particularly worryingly, two failed attempts, one of which was today to smuggle an explosive hidden into a laptop onto a plane. In fact, the first bomb did go off, but it was at such a height that it did not bring down the whole plane, and they managed to land safely, understandably, with only the suicide bomber himself being ejected from the plane.
Zoe Flood joining us live there from Nairobi on those latest events in Somalia today. Thank you very much indeed. To Tunisia now, which, in the words of its president, has suffered an unprecedented assault. More than 50 people were killed in an attack by extremists on a town near the Libyan border today. No group has yet claimed responsibility, but the Tunisian president says the jihadists involved may have been hoping to take control of the region in order to proclaim a new emirate. Here's Ben Guerdane with more.
Tunisia's president called it an unprecedented attack. The first attack by Islamist fighters on a Tunisian military installation. Monday, at the break of dawn, militants targeted a military base and nearby police postings in the town of Ben Guerdane, near the border with Libya. Tunisian forces retaliated. Dozens were killed, including militants, security officers, and civilians.
Most Tunisians are in a state of war against this recklessness, against these rats. The motive behind this attack was to take control of the region.
This attack comes 5 days after Tunisian soldiers killed 5 militants in a firefight in the same area.
Many jihadis are originally from the town of Ben Guerdane, either today in the ranks of the Islamic State or even historically. Even Zarqawi, one of the founders of the Islamic State, talked about Tunisian jihadis from Ben Guerdane while war was ongoing in Fallujah as far as 2004.
The presence of thousands of Islamic State organization militants in neighboring Libya poses a major threat to Tunisia. In 2015, 2 major attacks struck the country at the Bardo Museum in the capital, Tunis, and in the resort town of Sousse. In the wake of those attacks, Tunisian authorities dug a 200-kilometer trench along its border with Libya to try and prevent the infiltration of Islamist fighters.
To Nigeria now, and a scandal involving $15 million. That's the amount the country's former chief of defense accused of having misappropriated. Today in court, Air Marshal Alex Bade denied he used the money allocated for the country's air force to buy a mansion and a commercial plot of land and to build a shopping mall. Mr. Bade is the latest in a string of senior figures who served under Goodluck Jonathan to face graft charges in court. In Zambia, a leading member of the main opposition parties denied threatening the president. Geoffrey Mwamba, who's vice president of the United Party for National Development, was arrested on charges of inciting violence against Edgar Lungu last week. Police had accused him of threatening to go for the president's throat. This as political tension mounts ahead of presidential, parliamentary and local elections that are to be held in the country on August 11th. Now, counting has begun in Benin's presidential election and is now well underway. 33 candidates are vying to take over from President Thomas Boni Yayi, who's stepping down after 2 terms. Our reporter, Georgia Calvin-Smith, is in Cotonou, and she joins us now. Georgia, thanks very much indeed for being with us. Now, Benin is, of course, an example of strong, healthy democracy in Africa. Thomas Boni Yayi standing down after the 2 terms that the Constitution allowed him. Give us a little bit of an idea of how people in the streets are talking about this election. I mean, we knew it was coming. They had expected it. No one had expected anything else. But are they excited nonetheless?
Well, I mean, you've got to bear in mind that this is the country that was the first in Africa to successfully transition from a dictatorship to a working democracy. So there is no lack of enthusiasm or interest or involvement in getting involved in choosing what will be the country's 4th president. I mean, in the streets of Cotonou today, it was all people were talking about. It's on the front pages of the papers. We headed to a newsstand where we were inundated by crowds of people having very animated discussions about who they think should be the person to succeed President Boni Yayi. Now, the only thing at the moment that looks like it is definite is that we are going to be having a 2nd round vote. Who is going to be in that vote is yet to be confirmed, and that was the source of a lot of those discussions that we witnessed today in the country's economic capital. We've also been hearing that people anxious for the final numbers from Sunday's elections, camping outside of the Constitutional Court, waiting to be there when those final figures are released. So it really is something that, from what we've seen and from what we've heard, everyone is very excited about and very involved in.
Georgia Calvin-Smith joining us live there from Cotonou. He'll be covering the election for us there in Benin throughout the next few days. And as we begin to get those results, it is 57 minutes after 9 here in the French capital. A quick break and we'll be right back with the very latest news. I'll be back in just under an hour with another look at the latest news from the African continent.
You love watching France 24 in English.
Analysis from France 24. I'm Mark Owen. These are the main world news.
To the border with Algeria.
Huge lines since this morning to answer that question. But France 24 is also available in French.
14h à Paris, bonjour à tous, bienvenue si vous nous rejoignez sur France 24, préparez-vous.
and Arabic.
شعبية هذا الباب القادم من أمريكا الجنوبية في ازدياد.
Also coming up.
Featured on cable and satellite systems and online media in France and across the world.